The email notification popped up on my screen while I was checking our shared laptop. Subject line, Husband Boot Camp, registration confirmed. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I opened it and saw my name, my information, and a receipt for $1,499 paid from our joint account. My wife had signed me up, without a single word to me, for a 12-week program designed to transform difficult husbands into dream partners. I felt my blood pressure rise as I scrolled through the course outline. Week 1, recognizing your toxic traits. Week 2, learning to listen without defending. By week 12, I would apparently graduate as a renovated husband ready to meet my wife's emotional needs. Each bullet point felt like another nail in my dignity. Instead of slamming the laptop shut, I took a deep breath and kept my composure. This wasn't about anger. This was about strategy. I clicked through to their website and found testimonials from reformed men, all with the same defeated look in their eyes, standing beside triumphant wives. The program was run by a woman who called herself the husband whisperer. My first instinct was to confront her immediately, but something told me to dig deeper. I checked her search history and found conversations with her friends about how I needed to be fixed, how I worked too much, how I didn't anticipate her needs, how she and her friends had formed a pact to upgrade their husbands through this program. I closed the laptop and poured myself a whiskey. The betrayal wasn't just the boot camp. It was the public admission to her social circle that I was somehow defective. The casual way she'd spent our money to correct me without a conversation. The assumption that she had the right to engineer my personality without consent. That night at dinner, she chatted about her day as if nothing had happened. I played along, watching her talk about weekend plans and smiling as if I hadn't discovered her little project. When she mentioned casually that I might want to keep next Saturday morning free for something important, I nodded agreeably. "Anything for you," I said, raising my glass with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. After she went to bed, I stayed up late, not in anger, but in focused determination. I made 3 phone calls, to my lawyer, my financial advisor, and my closest friend. By morning, I had the outline of a plan. She wanted to enroll me in husband boot camp? Fine. I would attend, but not for the reasons she thought. I would be taking detailed notes, not on how to be a better husband, but on exactly what she and her friends thought was wrong with men like me. And while I learned what they wanted to fix, I would be quietly preparing my own curriculum. Single Life Forever Academy. Lesson 1 was already in progress. Never let someone else define your worth. The next morning, I kissed her goodbye as she left for work, acting completely normal. She had no idea that her husband boot camp had just activated a countdown, not to my reformation, but to her education about consequences. Saturday morning arrived. I walked into the hotel conference room where husband boot camp was being held, keeping my expression carefully neutral. 15 other men sat in uncomfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Most looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. A few seemed resigned, and 1 or 2 actually appeared eager, the kind of men who probably apologized for existing. The instructor walked in, a tall woman with an overly authoritative posture who introduced herself as Dr. Keller, specialist in male behavioral recalibration. She wore a power suit and spoke with the condescending tone of someone addressing children. The walls were decorated with posters bearing phrases like, "She's not demanding," "You're resisting growth," and "Your defensiveness is the problem." "Gentlemen, you're here because your marriages need intervention," she began, scanning the room. "Your wives love you enough to invest in your improvement." A few men nodded weakly. I remained still, observing everything. The first exercise involved writing down 3 things our wives complained about most. The men around me scribbled furiously, not helping enough with housework, not being emotionally available, working too much. I wrote nothing, just listened to their confessions. "And you, in the blue shirt?" Dr. Keller pointed at me. "What have you written?" "I'm still processing," I replied calmly. "I want to be thorough." She seemed surprised by my confidence, but moved on. During the break, I recognized one of the husbands as my wife's friend's husband. He approached me with a look of shared misery. "This is my 3rd week," he whispered. "My wife says I'm making progress, but honestly, I just tell her what she wants to hear. Makes life easier." I nodded sympathetically but said nothing revealing. Instead, I asked questions, gathering intelligence about which of my wife's friends had enrolled their husbands. For couples from our social circle were participating. They had a group chat where they compared notes on their husbands' progress. After lunch, we were asked to role-play scenarios where we typically fail our wives. One man stumbled through a scene where he needed to validate his wife's feelings without offering solutions. The instructor stopped him repeatedly. "No, that's still trying to fix things. Just listen and validate." When my turn came, I performed perfectly, not because I believed in the exercise, but because I wanted to understand their playbook. I mirrored exactly what they wanted to see, earning approving nods from Dr. Keller. "Excellent response pattern," she said. "Your wife will be pleased with your progress." The final session introduced the weekly homework, maintaining a gratitude journal about our wives and rehearsing prescribed responses to common trigger situations. We received binders with worksheets and a progress tracker for our wives to complete each week. As we left, Dr. Keller handed each of us a completion certificate for week 1, like gold stars for obedient schoolboys. I accepted mine with a firm handshake and direct eye contact that momentarily unsettled her. On the drive home, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt clarity. This wasn't marriage counseling. It was obedience training for men who'd surrendered their self-respect. That evening, I didn't mention the boot camp. When my wife casually asked about my morning, I said I'd met some interesting people and left it at that. Her surprised expression told me she'd expected me to either confess my attendance or lie about where I'd been. My ambiguous answer left her off balance, exactly where I wanted her. After dinner, I made 3 more calls, to a real estate agent, to a private investigator to document the boot camp's questionable practices, and to a friend who owned a cabin by the lake. Phase 2 of my plan was taking shape. While she thought I was being domesticated, I was designing my exit. 2 weeks into the charade, I maintained perfect attendance at the boot camp while systematically executing my plan. Each Saturday, I sat through 3 hours of conditioning designed to transform men into apologetic shadows. Each day at home, I implemented my own curriculum, what I privately called Single Life Forever Academy. First came the financial restructuring. I opened a separate bank account and redirected my next paycheck there. I consulted with my lawyer about the most strategic approach to protecting my assets, not out of greed, but out of principle. Someone who would spend our money to fix me without discussion shouldn't have unfettered access to the results of my labor. Next, I focused on reclaiming my independence. I renewed gym memberships and reconnected with friends my wife had subtly pushed away over the years. When she raised an eyebrow at my Thursday night basketball game, I responded with the exact active listening technique taught in boot camp. "I hear that you're concerned about my sudden interest in basketball. You feel that it's taking time away from us. That's valid." Then I went anyway. Her confusion was evident. According to her boot camp updates, I should be becoming more compliant, not more autonomous. Yet here I was, using their communication tactics while completely disregarding their intended outcome. At boot camp, I continued playing the role perfectly. I shared breakthroughs about my toxic traits and received approving nods from Dr. Keller. The other husbands started looking to me as a model student. Little did they know I was documenting every manipulative tactic, every demeaning exercise, building my case not just for my exit, but for something bigger. Week 3's session focused on deconstructing male pride. We were instructed to list instances where our ego had harmed our relationship, while others wrote about times they'd refused to ask for directions or insisted on fixing something themselves. I wrote about allowing someone to make decisions about my personal growth without my consent. Dr. Keller read my answer aloud, missing the subtext entirely. "This is excellent self-awareness," she told the group. "He's recognizing how refusing guidance impacts intimacy." That evening, my wife received her weekly progress report on my improvement. She approached me with a strange expression, somewhere between satisfaction and uncertainty. "The instructor says you're doing really well," she said, studying my face for a reaction. "I'm learning a lot about relationships," I replied, maintaining eye contact until she looked away first. "About respect, communication, and boundaries." She seemed pleased, completely missing that I wasn't referring to the lessons they intended. The following day, I toured 3 apartments without telling her. I selected one within my budget, in a neighborhood I'd always liked, and put down a deposit. The lease would begin next month. Perfect timing for the final phase of my plan. I also consulted with a different kind of professional, a public relations specialist who handled reputation management. If my wife and her friends wanted to play games with people's lives, they were about to learn that some games have unexpected consequences. At home, I started subtly removing my most valued possessions. Important documents went into a safe deposit box. Family heirlooms found their way to my office storage. Nothing dramatic enough to raise alarms. Essential preparations nonetheless. By week 4 of boot camp, the other husbands had warmed up to me completely. During breaks, they confided their frustrations, their sense of betrayal at being enrolled against their will. I listened more genuinely to them than I ever did in the official sessions. One man nearly broke down explaining how his self-esteem had plummeted since starting the program. "I don't even recognize myself anymore," he admitted. "I just keep apologizing for existing." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it's not you who needs to change," I told him quietly. Something shifted in his expression, small awakening of dignity long suppressed. That moment confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't just planning my exit from a manipulative marriage. I was developing a counter-curriculum for men who'd been told their masculine nature was something to be corrected rather than respected. Single Life Forever Academy was evolving into something more significant than personal revenge. It was becoming a reclamation project. By week 5, the changes in my behavior had become impossible to ignore. I maintained the perfect balance, just enough improvement to convince my wife the boot camp was working, while simultaneously establishing my independence in ways that left her increasingly unsettled. She noticed first when I stopped asking permission for small decisions. I didn't announce this change. I simply stopped the habit of checking with her before making plans. When she mentioned a dinner with her friends on Friday, I replied with a simple, "I won't be able to make it. I have other commitments." Her stunned expression was revealing. "What commitments?" "You never mentioned anything. Just some personal matters I need to handle." I responded with a calm smile, using the exact tone Dr. Keller had taught us for setting boundaries, except I was using it against the system rather than submitting to it. The following weekend brought the moment I'd been waiting for, a dinner party with all the couples involved in the boot camp scheme. My wife had been looking forward to it, eager to showcase her new and improved husband alongside her friends' recalibrated partners. I arrived at the restaurant looking sharp in a suit I'd bought specifically for the occasion. The other husbands wore casual clothes, already falling into the pattern of downplaying their presence. They looked surprised to see me so well-dressed and confident. Throughout dinner, I watched the dynamic unfold. The wives dominated the conversation, occasionally prompting their husbands with looks that said, "Remember your training." The men responded with rehearsed empathy and excessive deference. When the conversation turned to me, my wife proudly announced, "The boot camp has been amazing for us." It's like a different person. I raised my glass. "To personal growth and unexpected revelations," I said, making eye contact with each husband at the table. Something passed between us, a silent communication they understood but their wives missed entirely. During the main course, one wife complained about her husband forgetting to schedule a service appointment. The man immediately began his programmed apology routine, but I interrupted. "Actually, I think you handled that well," I told him directly. "You balanced multiple priorities and made a reasonable decision." Then I turned to his wife. "The boot camp has taught us a lot about respecting each other's judgment, wouldn't you agree?" A silence fell over the table. The woman looked to my wife, who seemed equally confused by my intervention. This wasn't the docile validation they expected. After dinner, while the wives clustered together comparing notes, I approached each husband individually, slipping them my business card with a simple message written on the back. "There's another way. Call me if you're interested." On the drive home, my wife was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, she spoke. "Dr. Keller said you're excelling at communication, but tonight you seemed different than what she described." "Different how?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. "More assertive. The other husbands defer to their wives now. You challenge them." I smiled. "Isn't effective communication about honestly expressing your perspective?" That's what I learned. She had no response to this weaponization of her own program's language. The next morning, my phone began buzzing with texts from the husbands. One after another, they reached out, asking what I'd meant by another way. I arranged to meet them at a private room in a local bar, away from the watchful eyes of their wives. That night, as I prepared to leave, my wife asked where I was going. "Men's support group," I answered truthfully, though not completely. "Is that part of the boot camp?" she asked, visibly trying to recall if this was a scheduled activity. It's my own initiative, I replied. I'm taking personal responsibility for my growth. Again, the program's language left her without grounds to object, though suspicion clouded her features. At the bar, 5 husbands showed up. Their postures were hunched, their eyes downcast. Men who'd been systematically convinced their natural instincts were flawed. For the next 2 hours, I outlined what I'd discovered about the boot camp's psychological manipulation tactics. I explained how I'd been using their techniques to regain control rather than surrender it. By the time they left, something had straightened in their spines. We agreed to meet again, the first unofficial session of what would become my counterprogram. Not about dominating their wives, but about reclaiming their self-respect. When I returned home, my wife was waiting up. "How was your support group?" she asked too casually. "Transformative," I answered honestly. "I think we're all starting to see things much more clearly now." Week 8 marked the beginning of the end. I'd been straddling 2 worlds, compliant husband at boot camp and the architect of my liberation at home. My underground meetings with the other husbands had grown. From 5 men, we expanded to 12, with each new member bringing another husband desperate to reclaim his dignity. Meanwhile, I'd finalized my exit strategy. The apartment was furnished, my essential possessions relocated, and my finances secured. The only remaining step was the confrontation I'd been meticulously planning for nearly 2 months. I chose a Sunday evening when we were both home with nowhere to go. She was reviewing my latest progress report from Dr. Keller with obvious satisfaction. The document rated my submission to guidance and receptiveness to correction with high marks. "Dr. Keller says you've shown remarkable improvement," she said, smiling as if bestowing a great compliment. "She thinks you're ready for the advanced modules." I sat down across from her, maintaining direct eye contact. "Before we discuss that, I'd like to show you something I've been working on." I placed a folder on the table between us. She opened it, expecting household budget plans or vacation ideas, something appropriately domestic. Instead, she found divorce papers, already signed by me, along with printed screenshots of her conversations with friends about the boot camp and bank statements showing my financial separation. Her face transformed from confusion to shock to anger in seconds. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" "Not at all," I replied calmly. "Consider it my graduation project." "I don't understand," she stammered, flipping through the documents. "The boot camp was helping us. Dr. Keller said you were making excellent progress." "I was certainly learning," I agreed. "Just not the lessons you intended." Her eyes narrowed as realization dawned. "You've been pretending this whole time?" "I prefer to call it research," I said. "While you enrolled me in husband boot camp without my knowledge or consent, I enrolled myself in a different program altogether. Mine was about recognizing manipulation, reasserting boundaries, and planning an exit strategy from a relationship without respect." She tried to pivot to anger. "This is exactly why you needed the boot camp. You're being irrational and defensive instead of working on our marriage." I remained perfectly calm, my voice level. "Let me be clear. The moment you decided to fix me without my input, you ended our marriage. You just didn't know it yet." She switched tactics, tears welling up. "I only did it because I love you. I wanted us to be better." "No," I corrected her. "You wanted me to be different. There's a fundamental distinction there." Her voice rose, desperation creeping in. "We can work through this. I'll cancel the boot camp. We can try regular counseling instead. That might have been an option 2 months ago, if you'd approached me as an equal partner rather than a project to be corrected." She grabbed her phone. "I'm calling my sister." "You're not thinking clearly." "I've never been more clear," I said, rising from my chair. "And I've already spoken with your sister." She was quite surprised to learn about the boot camp. "Apparently, you told her we were in couples therapy that I had suggested." Her face paled. The lies were unraveling faster than she could manage. "You have 2 choices," I continued. "We can proceed with a clean, quiet divorce where you keep your dignity intact. Or you can fight it, and I'll be forced to reveal to everyone, including your family, exactly how you and your friends have been manipulating your husbands. I have documentation, testimony from other men, and recordings from the sessions." "You recorded the sessions?" she gasped. "That's illegal." "Actually, it's not. I checked with my lawyer. Single-party consent is all that's required in this state. And several husbands consented." She stared at the divorce papers, reality sinking in. What about our life together? Our plans? Those ended the moment you decided I needed to be fundamentally changed rather than respected, I replied, gathering my keys and wallet. I've already moved out. You can reach me through my lawyer. As I headed for the door, she made one last attempt. Please, we can fix this. I made a mistake. I turned back briefly. That's the first honest thing you've said in months. But some mistakes change everything. And with that, I walked out, feeling neither joy nor anger, only the quiet satisfaction of having stood my ground. Later that night, as I settled into my new apartment, my phone lit up with messages from the other husbands. Word had spread about my confrontation. They wanted details, guidance, courage. Some were ready to follow my path. Others just needed to know it was possible to break free. I sent them all the same reply. Welcome to Single Life Forever Academy. First lesson, your dignity is non-negotiable. The storm broke 48 hours after I walked out. My soon-to-be ex-wife launched her counteroffensive with predictable tactics. First came the barrage of texts oscillating between rage and tearful pleas. When those went unanswered, she mobilized her support network. Her friends, her family, even our mutual acquaintances received her carefully crafted version of events. According to her narrative, I had suffered some kind of psychological break. The boot camp had been a loving attempt to save our marriage from my increasingly erratic behavior. My departure was painted as abandonment, my financial preparations as calculated cruelty. I remained silent, letting her exhaust her ammunition. My lawyer fielded the legal threats that inevitably followed. Her attorney demanded I return to the marital home for reconciliation attempts and implied I would face serious financial penalties for my desertion. My response was a single document, the full curriculum of the husband boot camp, including exercises designed to break men's self-esteem, the psychological manipulation tactics, and testimonials from other husbands. The legal threats evaporated overnight. 10 days after my departure, she requested a meeting at a neutral location. I agreed, selecting a cafe with enough privacy for conversation but public enough to deter dramatic scenes. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. She arrived 5 minutes late, dressed immaculately as if appearance could compensate for the collapse of her control. I stood briefly as she approached, a courtesy, not submission. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice carefully modulated to project calm rationality. "I think we need to discuss this situation like adults." "I agree," I replied. "That's why I brought these." I placed a folder on the table, copies of the text conversations between her and her friends, discussing us like trainers comparing notes on show dogs. She glanced at them, then pushed the folder aside. Those were taken out of context. We were just trying to help each other strengthen our marriages. By systematically undermining your husband's autonomy and dignity, that's an interesting approach to strengthening relationships. She leaned forward, switching tactics. "Look, I know the boot camp was a mistake. I should have talked to you first. But throwing away 7 years over one bad decision seems extreme." "It wasn't one decision," I corrected her. "It was the culmination of a pattern. The boot camp just revealed what you really thought of me, as someone to be corrected rather than respected." Her composure slipped momentarily. "So you're just done? Just like that? I gave you 7 years of trying to be what you wanted. When that wasn't enough, you tried to have me professionally reprogrammed without my consent." "Yes, I'm done." She took a different angle. "What about all the good times? The plans we made? You're willing to throw all that away." "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm preserving what's left of my self-respect." "There's a difference." Her eyes narrowed. "And what about your new little group? The other husbands you've been turning against their wives?" I smiled slightly. "I haven't turned anyone against anyone. I simply showed them the same respect you and your friends denied us, the right to make informed choices about their own lives. They're talking about leaving their wives too, you know. You've created a disaster." "No, I provided information and support. They're making their own decisions based on how they've been treated. Some are leaving. Others are renegotiating their marriages on more equal terms. That's their choice." She tried one last approach, reaching for my hand across the table. "I miss you. Can't we at least try counseling? Real counseling this time." I moved my hand away. "I've spent 2 months analyzing our relationship from every angle. The problem wasn't communication or compatibility. It was fundamental respect. That can't be counseled back into existence." Her facade finally cracked. So what happens now? You just walk away and start your own anti-marriage cult. What happens now is we complete our divorce as efficiently as possible. As for what I'm building, it's not anti-marriage. It's per dignity. Some men will use what they learn to leave manipulative relationships. Others will use it to transform troubled marriages into respectful ones. The common denominator is that men deserve better than to be treated as renovation projects. I placed my credit card on the bill before standing. My lawyer will contact yours to finalize the details. I wish you well, I truly do. But I won't sacrifice my self-respect for someone who saw me as fundamentally flawed. As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a group message from the other men. Our first official meeting of Single Life Forever Academy would start in an hour at a rented office space. 28 men had registered, many from the boot camp, others who'd heard through word of mouth. That day marked the official launch of what would become a national movement. Not about bitterness toward women, but about men reclaiming their autonomy and dignity in relationships. The boot camp that was meant to domesticate me instead catalyzed a counter-revolution. 3 months later, as my divorce finalized, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Keller herself. The husband boot camp had shut down amid controversy and legal threats from former participants. She wanted to open a dialogue about my concerns. I declined her invitation with the same response I now give to all the men who find their way to my program. I'm not interested in dialogue with those who begin conversations by assuming I need to be fixed. My time is reserved for those who approach with respect. The last I heard, my ex-wife had moved to another state to start fresh. I wish her no ill will. In an unexpected way, her attempt to remake me gave me the push I needed to become fully myself. Sometimes the best response to someone trying to control your life is to simply create a better one without them.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.